Welcome to Coffee and the Bull.
Hey guys, Mike and John with Coffee and a Bull here today to talk about Mike's reenactment of the mountain that is broken.
No.
And sorry,
I was hunting earlier. Come out the deer stand. Didn't see nothing.
nothing at all, guys. Today's episode is going to be called "Can't Rub Dirt in a Death Notification." What we're going to be talking about today is kind of the way that we were brought up on: rub some dirt on it, walk it off. All the
Suck
things,
it up, buttercup.
right? All the things our dads used to tell us to make us stop crying, get up, and move on with our lives, and how may have stopped the crying, but it didn't solve the problem.
Right.
So
No, it was one of the things, I remember growing up, and a lot of this was, it wasn't my parents being malicious. It wasn't that they were negligent,
right,
or they didn't care. But when we would take and hurt ourselves because we were poor, we were, my parents weren't trying to pay emergency room visits more than they needed to, because much like today, they make whatever number they want up for the emergency room visit. And that number's more than one, so my it wasn't really in the bank account that often. So
right.
but I remember we grew up, we spent some time out in the middle of nowhere, Alabama. We could be, whether it be playing dodgeball on a bicycle or whatever, random, racing go-karts or four-wheelers, flipping four-wheelers, whatever it was. As young boys, we would always get hurt. I mean, that's just nature of the beast. Whether it be rollerblading on concrete, slipping down and scraping your knee or an elbow. Cutting yourself with a pocket knife. At one point, man, we used to. I hope my son doesn't do this because it's dumb. But we were legit. There'd be 4 or 5 of us, and grew up in redneck town, Alabama. Everybody had a pocket knife or whatever, so we would take and stand in a circle and throw pocket knives at each other's feet. If you moved your foot, you were dumb or whatever it was. Whatever insensitive thing we could call you.
Oh, my dad is.
Now, granted, we didn't, nobody, believe it or not, nobody got stabbed in the foot, but we were always doing dumb stuff with, whether it be, pocket knives or whatever, and we were always getting hurt, and you busted elbows, busted knees, cuts all over the place, bruising and all this other stuff. And one of the things my mom did, and I remember there was one time I wiped out on this bike, it was, I think a ball rolled in front of the tire or whatever, and I tried to turn, and I didn't matrix it very well, I didn't dodge it. I hit
there was
that
no
ball.
tuck and roll. It was all slide.
I hit that ball, and I went over the handlebars, and I smoothed. I'm talking about both elbows, both knees, just scraped. I left probably a pound of flesh in that concrete, and I did the manliest that I could possibly do as 10 or 11, 12-year-old kid, whatever age I was. And I remember just screaming at the top of my lungs. And my mom's on the front porch of the house. She saw everything. And her thing was always, hey, come over here. She wouldn't come to us. And it wasn't, I don't think it was her being lazy. But that was more of her thing of, hey, take a moment, suck it up, and realize, hey, you can walk. You're not that hurt or anything like that. And granted, I never had a broken bone at the time, that time of my life, or anything like that. So it was always, it built that idea of, hey, just suck it up. Granted, it's going to look gnarly, chicken dick scars, and all that other stuff, that we get taught.
Which is such bullshit. I've never met a chick ever in my life that
was like, ooh, look at that.
Scars. Like, first off, Mel Gibson, you're a
Got
liar.
This appendectomy scar.
Right.
I still have my appendix. Just random.
I just want to know. Yeah, I'm impressed that you knew, number one, the appendage, and number two, that was the name of the surgery. I still have my appendix as well. I don't know how, but no, I never believed that adage that chicks take scars. Never once in my life has any woman ever been like, "Let me see your scars, big fella." Like, it's never happened.
What?
I'm waiting for the hibachi to take off.
Nope.
It's just gonna gurgle.
I fixed it today.
No, we didn't.
But anyway, it was one of the things where you take and you suck it up. You ignore your pain. You ignore whatever tears you got going on, and the burning sensation, of you now have exposed nerve endings or whatever it is, whatever it is. You sucked it up, and that's where I remember growing up, like playing, whether it be baseball or whatever the sport was, like you would get hurt and you just, you grinned and bared it and,
Right.
and kept going on. And, kind of a lot of your older guys, oh, that's a tough kid or whatever. And you were looked at as being a tough kid.
Right.
But that transition later on into life, and I think that's where a lot of our downfalls come from, because you've got a bunch of guys who, are experiencing pain on a whole different level. You're not talking about a skinned elbow or something like that.
Right.
While that could be, relatively excruciating, it's not like, the guy who's going home, who, let's say it wasn't even, something like adultery or anything like that. But let's say, we deal with it all the time where we work fatalities in car wrecks. It's nobody enjoys them. It's not something that it happens. That's
Right.
just anybody with a driver's license
Part of life,
is
nature
apt
of the
to
beast,
have,
yeah.
And so we deal with that all the time. Well, there's you got a guy who loses his wife and his kids or whatever in a car wreck. I worked one of those, and I remember just being heartbroken for this guy.
Right.
And how does that guy go home and rub dirt in it?
Right.
And that's kind of where the title comes from. Where hey, you don't get to rub dirt in a death notification. It doesn't just go away. It doesn't heal itself. A little bit of brown powder on it from the ground isn't going to make that heartache go away.
It makes me wonder where we crossed that over. And what I mean by that is like falling down, getting hurt, and dad or mom or somebody going, hey, rub some dirt on it. Or big brother going, shut up, they're going to hear us. Never did something like that happen where, because most of my childhood I lost somebody, whether it was my grandmother or my uncle or a brother or whatever, we lost somebody. Nobody ever came up to me and were like, hey, knock it off or stop crying.
Right.
Nobody ever did that. Nobody ever told me it
But you
wasn't
thought
okay.
they were going to.
Right. And so, like, you swallowed it down and swallowed it down and swallowed it down because you felt like that's what was going to happen. That's what was going to be said, or you'd be thought less of because nobody told you as a young man that it's okay to hurt. It's okay to cry. And I feel like we have done ourselves a disservice. And this is like we were talking about, you overcompensate for your children now because you get into that mind frame of like, no, there's times you've got to cry. There's, and we talk about it all the time, like, guys at work that we're out there, we're dealing with them and they're just broken up, but they don't know how to express themselves healthy.
Right.
It's always out of anger, like that dumb joke I made the other day about we're allowed to be hungry, we're allowed to be horny, and we're allowed to be angry. And that's the only three emotions that are expected of us. And I think that's because the childhood aspect is broken where young boys, young men, nobody ever tells them it's okay to emotionally talk. It's okay to have a comfortable place for you to open up and say, right. I'm hurt. I need to express myself. I need to, get this out. And I love my dad to death, but there was never a time, like I saw my dad cry one time, and it was when my grandmother, my mom's mom, it was when she passed away. And he didn't bawl like a baby. He didn't break down. I just, he had a couple of tears and then he was back to business. But it was in those moments, never once did he, come here, son, let me, give me a hug or there was no compassion
right.
in that. And I'm not jabbing at him at all. Like my dad is a great dad. He did the best that he could do. But, like you say, we never got a manual.
Right. They didn't get one either.
Right. And so it's something now that without even thinking about it, it's unconscious. Like I don't think to myself when I deal with my son, I don't say to myself like, hey, remember to be compassionate or hey,
right.
be softer or whatever. And I know we've talked about it in previous episodes. Like I pull him aside, like, the time I hit him in the face with a baseball because he wasn't paying attention and, didn't catch it. I pulled him aside and say, hey man, look, this is not the place we cry. This isn't it. Like
right.
when we get home later and you want to sit down and cry about it, you want to talk about it, I got you. But right here, we're at the ballpark, my guy.
Right.
There ain't nothing but other kids, and kids are brutal and savages. Like, this is not the place that we break this down. And, I didn't consciously tell myself, like, hey, let him know he can cry later. It was nothing like that. It was just, Nobody ever did that for me. Nobody ever stood there and was like, "Hey, bro, now is not the time."
Right.
Like, wait till.
Well, I know for me it was. My dad never said, "Hey, don't cry" or anything like that.
Right.
And you know, and like I said, we're not throwing any shade. We're not, saying, "Hey, your parents are horrible people" or anything like. I'm not going down that road.
Right.
But one of the things that happened is, and I think we were talking about it prior to filming this episode, was our parents were raising them excuse me, our parents were raising us for the world that they grew up in,
Right.
because that's all they had experiencing it, and so I know that my dad had a very rough upbringing, between, I'm not going to go into a lot of his detail because that's his story,
Right.
but between, having issues with his parents, he grew up very, very, very poor. At one point he was homeless, and when he did get, his grandmother took him in. She was dirt poor, and he grew up with clothes that didn't fit, things like that.
Right.
They couldn't afford school lunches at the time, and it was a time period where the schools really didn't care if you had the money or not. If you had it, you got food. If you didn't, you didn't. So
Right.
he went to school every day with he calls it a pone. I don't know what a pone is, but it was a thing of cornbread. That's all he had. That's what he ate every day, and so they made fun of him for that, made fun of his clothes, made fun of different things going on.
Does your dad
And
eat
so-
cornbread now?
Yes. He only eats a certain way though. But he had to grow up tough.
Right.
He had to grow up where he couldn't show emotion, because he was too busy fighting bullies. I mean, that was back at the time where they didn't have zero tolerance, bullying
Right,
policies or
right.
any other stuff. Like, hey, you dealt with it. You
Right.
dealt with your bullying, you moved on. And so he grew up in that mindset where, hey, you don't get the opportunity to express your emotions and stuff like that. So
Right.
why would I expect him to teach anything other than that? And granted,
Right.
he wasn't a hard ass or anything like that on us as far as, hey, don't cry or any of this other stuff. As long as the timing was right. But I don't remember, at funerals. I don't remember crying at funerals, not because I thought, he would get mad at us or anything like that. But that's you're a guy. You don't cry.
Right.
You have to be tough. And that was a very difficult thing to learn.
Right. And that's my dad, his parents got divorced when he was little. I mean,
Right.
younger than my kids. And my dad's the oldest of 9. There's 4 with counting him with his mom, and then his dad went on to have 5 more kids. So being the oldest of 9, he's the biggest in his family. Like, my daddy's a big man. And honest to God, like, if he didn't look exactly like my grandpa, who's like 5'6", 5'7",
Right, you wouldn't think he was there.
like, I'd be like, nah, they ain't related. But my grandmother, she left Pennsylvania. That's where my daddy's family's from. She left Pennsylvania and went to California with him, his twin brothers, and my Uncle Jerry. And so my dad went from this, innocent little boy to, I'm now the man of the house. There is no, dad figure.
Right.
And I've got 3 younger brothers that I've got to be there for and be their protector and be their guardian or whatever. And now, don't get me wrong, based on the stories that my uncles tell me, he was a jackass. But he joined the military, and that, gave him that responsibility to be an adult and everything else. But raising me, he had no structural guidance.
Right.
He had no male role model. And so that's, in my opinion, that's why that man gets up before the sun. That's why he goes to bed after the sun. It's in his brain that his job is to get up, go to work, provide, here's your food, here's your clothes, here's your shelter. That's all you get. Don't ask for more, because I'm going to remind you what I gave you, and that's food, clothes, and a house. And I laugh about it now because we weren't poor. We had enough to pay the bills. Sometimes. That's the best way I can word that. Sometimes. And not my daddy's fault. It was my mom's fault. She was terrible with money. But going through, like, life, when I had a problem with something, my dad was not the dad that stepped in. He didn't like going to schools. He didn't like having talks with the principal or the teachers or the conferences or anything like that. It was always my mom. And that was a mean lady. Like, I'm not talking shit about my mom. She's, gone now. But if somebody had to go to bat for me, it was my mom.
Right.
If somebody picked on me at school, it was my mom in the front yard going, look, I'm a lefty, so let me show you how to get up with this left south hook, like south palm in the jaw. They won't see it coming because you're right hand. And I'm like, I feel like my dad should be teaching me this. But, when you're built like him, you didn't really need to know how to fight. People just didn't want to fight you.
Right.
Like, you're just such an ogre of a man. But so I think now that's why, like with me, with my son, I give him more compassion than I got. But I keep finding myself trying to find a balance because sometimes it's like my dad comes out in me. But then there's other times where I can be like, okay, I need to look this up on how to get through to him without you're going to listen to me or you're going to, catch a beating or not catch a beating. I wouldn't hurt him, but get disciplined in some way or another. So it's an uphill struggle, and I don't want him to lose the child he is because I'm too hard on him.
Right.
I know that he emulates everything I do. Like, he wants to be so much like his dad that I don't ever want to show him that I lack the ability to be or have emotions or talk about my feelings or, things like that. It's one of the big reasons, like, him and his mom, or his mom and I, were divorced. Can't stand her. That's the thing between her and I.
Right. But still his mom.
Right. That's still his mama. And I go out of my way when she's present to hold my tongue. I don't say the things I want to say. When she makes off the wall comments or does something that anybody else in this world would get told where their place was, I let it ride and I wait till she leaves and I send her a text message. I'm like, hey, you're going to cut that shit out. You do that shit in my house again, you ain't coming back. Knowing full well that I'm not going to do that. Like, because I don't want him to see it and be like, okay, so we don't like mama.
Mm-hmm.
Or that's how we treat our mom. Or that's how we treat the lady we had kids with or whatever. I don't want him raised like that.
Right.
I don't want him to have that thought in his brain. And it's a lot of people ask me when she got the flat tire, I went out, I changed the tire, I had both kids with me. There were some other circumstances with it, but, went and picked her up, drove her to her car, changed the tire for her, and sent her on her way. And my son is like, Dad, why are we doing this? Like, Mom can change her own tire. And it's like, that's not the point. That we're here. This is what you do. This is what you do for the whether we're married or not married. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to set an example for your kids so that they can set examples for their kids. And they have that core memory that I can dislike her with a passion. Doesn't mean I have to treat her bad. It doesn't mean that it's okay for anybody else to treat her bad. And so, my little girl, is the same thing with her. I want her to know that when she chooses somebody to be with, even if things fall apart, she should choose somebody who is still going to come and help her and still going to be there, pick good people, good partners. And it's, as much as this is a, you can't rub dirt on a death notification, it's really more of trying to identify where we lost ourselves as kids.
Right.
To become, who we are now, and how we take that message of just rub some dirt in it and reapply it in a modified way so that our sons don't grow up to be the men today who just get up at the break of dawn and go to work and come home and think I've fulfilled my obligation without the substance for everybody else in the house.
So I think, if we can get it back into, rubbing dirt on it. You remember scraping your knee playing ball, rub a little dirt on it because it kept the blood from going all over the place.
Right.
It helped it.
That weird medical coagulated.
Yeah, you're going to get a tapeworm, but at least you won't. You don't need a Band-Aid right now. And so
bacterial infection.
I don't know that that's how you get tapeworms, but I feel like it's infection.
It's close. It's close.
Infection at a minimum.
Right.
But it was, you did that because, one, you probably didn't have a Band-Aid, or first aid kit anywhere.
You couldn't
around,
afford it, right?
Or anything like that. But also,
did you
where
ever...
I do have to give it credit. We'll come back to that. I don't even know what you're going to say, but I know you're going to derail it.
Yeah, I probably
but
will.
where I will give that phrase some credit is it did teach you to
self-aid.
To stop giving more attention than was needed to something minor.
Right.
And that's like my son right now, he'll get the most. If he gets a splinter in his foot,